It had started out as any other of the 100 hunting trips I'd been on. My hunting buddy and I had gotten to our stands long before dawn and waited for first light, so hopefully one or both of us would get a shot at a nice big buck. Jim and I had scouted the area back in late August and had seen some good sign, and we were both hopeful that our new hunting spot would prove fruitful. We had placed our stands about 200 yards from each other's. This being our first time hunting in this area, the property was enormous and very densely wooded, and we didn't want to become separated or lost in this vast area. The sun rose, and the forest should have been alive with the buzz of insects, bird song, and the forest critters going about their daily foraging, but the woods remained eerily still and deathly silent. I'd been sitting in my stand for hours without even seeing a squirrel. I decided that I'd had enough for this morning, and I would try my luck again that afternoon. When I heard Jim scream, and then a loud thud immediately followed, I quickly descended down from my tree, bow in hand, and made my way towards my friend's hunting area. I got within 25 yards and had to stifle a scream of my own. Hunkered down and on all fours was what I first thought was a large black bear. It had Jim's throat in its long maw. It bit down and tore the flesh away, almost severing his head from his body. I stood there frozen, unbelieving of what I'd just seen. Fear and anguish kept me paralyzed for what seemed like days. And then what I had mistaken as a bear turned its attention towards me. It stood up on two legs and turned towards me, still chewing on the chunk of Jim. Its dark eyes met mine. And then it dawned on me. It wasn't a bear at all. It was a werewolf, at least 7 feet tall. Corded muscles bulged under a mat of black fur. It cleared the distance between us in fractions of a second. I had no time to react. It swung its long arm towards me, more of a large hand than a paw. It struck the side of my head, and darkness followed. I woke in a tree root hollow cave, under broken branches with leaves still attached. My head was pounding. I found it hard to focus my vision. I wondered if I had a concussion. I laid there, still, trying to listen. I didn't sense my attacker nearby, so I slowly rolled over to my stomach and got to my feet. I looked around at my surroundings, and a few feet from me, I saw a hand sticking out from more brush. I threw the broken foliage off and found Jim's lifeless body. Other parts of him had showed predation. I tried not to look at my friend's torn remains. There was nothing I could do for him now. I fished around in his pockets and retrieved his truck keys. Then I noticed his .45 still in its holster on his hip. I grabbed the sidearm and the 2 spare mags he carried. I checked the pistol. It was loaded. I thumbed off the safety and exited the hollow, gun at the ready. There was no sign of the beast, but I proceeded as quickly and as quietly as I dared. I had no desire to be here when it returned. The sun was sitting high in the afternoon sky when I decided to take a quick rest and try to get my bearings. I had no idea where I was. This part of the forest was completely alien to me, and I wasn't sure if I was just going deeper. I took a moment to think about what I should do. I decided to climb a tree and see if there was something I could find to get me out of this. A creek, a road, open fields, anything to get out of this situation I was in. I found a large tall pine and began clambering up its limbs. I got as high up as I safely could and looked out in all directions. Off in the distance, and a few miles off, I could see a large break in the tree line that ran quite a distance. It was the only thing I saw that may lead me out of this nightmare. Out of the tree and on the move again. Off in the distance, I heard a loud and angry howl. My absence had been noticed. I quickened my pace, hoping to make it to the gap before the creature caught up with me. I made it to the break in the trees. What I found was an old railroad track out of service and disrepair. It probably hadn't been used in 20 years, but I was relieved to find it. The sun was now hanging low, and I decided to try to follow it out. I hadn't made it very far when I caught movement to my left. A dark shape, darting from tree to tree. I gripped my pistol hard and pointed in that direction, scanning the tree line for any more movement, but none came. I cautiously proceeded down the track, my head on a swivel. I kept moving. I could feel it watch me from inside the forest, all the while. The sun was starting to set, and the thought of being out here after dark, alone, no light, no shelter, filled me with dread. When I noticed further up the old tracks, the forest came to an end. Up ahead looked like open fields. Maybe there was a house or a road or something. At the very least, I would have a better chance at spotting it if it had decided to come in on me. I was 50 yards from the field when a large dark shape emerged from the tree line and stood in the middle of the tracks, blocking my way out. It stood there, growling and glaring at me. It bared its sharp teeth. He had had his fun with me, but now his game was over, and he wasn't about to let me slip away that easy. The werewolf charged forward towards me with his amazing speed, but this time I was ready. Gun in hand, I raised and pointed it at the dark figure bearing down on me. I squeezed the trigger again and again until the magazine was spent. It stopped in its tracks. As the slugs hit home, it howled in pain and ran back into the forest. I dropped the spent mag and loaded a fresh one in. I ran towards the open field ahead. As I passed the spot where it had darted back into the forest, I noticed a splash of blood and chunks of flesh. Adorned with black hair, I smiled inwardly and felt some satisfaction in the creature's pain. I hoped it would die slowly from its wounds, but I wasn't going to hang around to find out. A short ways off the track and through the field, I found a road and a mobile home nearby. The family that lived there were kind enough to let me in and call the local sheriff's office for me. I first ended up at the hospital and indeed had a concussion. There I spent the next several days explaining what had transpired to the local and state authorities. They didn't seem to believe my story, but did send out a search and rescue party to retrieve Jim's remains, and I finally got to go home. I was never more happy to be back in the city. A few weeks had passed, and normality had slowly begun to set in. When late one night, I was awoken by an all too familiar, angry howl. I thought it had only been a dream. Then I heard it again. I grabbed my 9mm out of the nightstand and went to the rear window of my duplex and peered out. Standing in the alley stood a large, dark figure, barely visible in the shadows, glaring at me. I felt my eyes begin to water, my heart begin to race, and I knew exactly who it was. He had followed me to the city. To be continued.